6'4". He weighed in at 218.8 pounds. Also has a professional record of 2 wins, 1 loss, with both of his wins also coming by knockout. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Relentless Grayson Wells. The man in charge of the action when it starts inside the cage for this championship fight is Mr. Andy Social.
And now it seems to have gotten that straight. Remember speaking to Grayson briefly after his bout with Charisma Fantasy, he drew attention to the fact that he was able to use his elusiveness and his mobility to get there first against Charisma Fantasy, and I wonder if that's going to be the advantage that he's going to hold intact here tonight against Steve, the Consequence Roy.
He looked amazing against Crystal Fantasy, I gotta say. I know I caught the end of what you were saying, but Grayson really looked professional and poised in that fight.
And he needed to.
Yeah, you're right.
He absolutely needed to. Those were his best weapons against an absolutely imposing man. Steve Roy working a few fakes here, letting that jab out.
I'll tell you one thing, I believe that Grayson Wells is one of those guys that he looks powerful, but I think his punching is a lot more powerful than it actually looks. I mean, he was able to drop the Fantasy with a sort of almost a brushing hook as he came in.
And usually that's when the Fantasy gets started.
Yes, exactly.
Steve Roy able to drive through it, find himself in the top position against the cage here right in front of us. Grayson getting his back up. Now it's Steve Roy enjoying a little bit of control, taking the back now. He's got one hook in.
You know what, a good time early in this fight when they're not all greased up and sweaty to get that back and be able to take that position.
Absolutely, but Grayson finds himself up front here now. And Steve Roy is committing to a full guard up against the cage, which is not a good decision in my estimation.
Steve Roy needs to position himself either to get up the cage and crawl out of this position, or to get at least his feet onto the cage more and get his head away from the cage.
Absolutely, you know, man, he needs to get every advantage he can at the outset of this fight, because as it goes on, with a big man like Grayson on top of you, you're gonna have just less and less fight to give.
You know, we talked about this earlier, Chris, with the angle we're seeing right now in the fight. It's sort of tough sometimes to call what's going on the other side because we're blind, so we don't have a monitor, obviously, to watch what's going on the other side. So it's tough to call the fight when you potentially where we're sitting, you can't see it that well.
You know, Steve Roy is doing one thing absolutely perfectly right now, and that's breaking down the posture of Grayson Wells. Grayson Wells, without his head above his hips and without him postured up inside the guard of Steve Roy, is unable to land any significant strikes whatsoever.
I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Grayson Wells probably would rather have this standing up right now than on the ground, but he's actually doing a great job on the ground of at least attacking Roy as much as he can in Roy's defensive position.
No, I remember Grayson's fight with Devin Neese previously being trapped inside the guard and doing quite a bit of damage from this position, so he's not a noobish at all to this. You know, I remember him kind of hitting a wall that night, you know, basically punching himself out. And that definitely does not look to be the case here tonight, as he's definitely picking his shots. But what he needs to be doing is getting his hands on Steve Roy's chest and pushing off of him rather than pushing off the floor.
I agree with you. He needs to create that distance so he can open up.
And there we see it now. And as he predicted, Grayson opts to stand up rather than keep the pressure on the ground. Steve Roy has got every opportunity to stand up quick here.
Nice job by Grayson.
Steve Roy is in a horrible spot to be in, no matter what round or what stage of the fight we're in. Manages to find a half guard around Grayson Wells.
Now, I know you know the ground game a lot better than I do, but would he not have been at a better advantage there to sit out on that?
Yeah. I don't know if, man, Grayson Wells has every opportunity to slowly pass this guard, keep pressure on his opponent while landing strikes when the opportunity presents itself.
Now Grayson's in a good position. You know what? You're so right. If all he did right now was create that separation with hands to the chest rather than putting his hands behind his head, because he can't do any damage with those hands behind his head. But in the position he was in, he could do a lot of damage. Obviously, he already has with some elbows by creating that separation.
Steve Roy is opened up now over his right eye here, and he moves back to a full guard. And what he needs to do now from this full guard position is keep his guard up high, work on the posture of Grayson Wells, and that's an unbelievably exhausting problem to have to solve mid-fight. A lot of guys look at these athletes and they don't think about the smaller things, about the core strength, and about the level of resistance that they're facing when they're down there, when a guy's holding onto their head, when he's got the weight of their calves and their feet over top their spine. That could be a very, very, very trying position.
Great job by Grayson Wells in the first round to keep the pressure on him. Doesn't certainly look like he's gassed himself out at all.
Check. I need all security guards around the ring, please. All security guards.
It's sort of funny. We talked earlier in the fight, or early in the night, excuse me. We talked earlier about the fact that Grayson Wells is sort of a tweener, obviously. At 218 pounds, he's not going to make 205 in the shape he's in right now. And he's having to fight guys at 264 pounds. It's actually too bad that our sport didn't institute another weight division to make it easier for Grayson Wells to at least move up the food chain in the sport, because right now he's going to be fighting guys that walk around at 280 and cut to 264 for all their fights, and that's a tough difference in a guy that walks around at 218 pounds.
No, absolutely, and Grayson's no slouch physically anywhere, but it makes a difference. I mean, especially with a seasoned guy who knows how to use that weight. I mean, if he had faced a Chris LaFantasy who was willing to shoot first and wear him down, put him against the fence, and make him play the ground game a little bit, that might have been a different fight altogether. But he played the right game on that night, but it's not going to be something he can do and replicate every night going forward.
And again, if he gets up to the higher levels, every guy he fights is going to be 260 pounds and over.
Absolutely.
At least 255, and that's just going to be a tough disadvantage for him, which is too bad, because I think he's actually a skilled athlete, and he's fun to watch.
No, I know he is, and like I said, he's almost like a different fighter every time out. Right now, compared to the fight we keep mentioning previously, his bout with Chris LaFantasy, I mean, right now he is taking his time. He was a much faster starter in a bout with LaFantasy, and I gotta think that he's fighting. Amateur rules fight here for Havoc Fighting Championship. Blaine being my friend, took a little bit of a beating that night, so I wasn't the biggest Grayson Wells fan. But after subsequent bouts against Devin Neese, Chris LaFantasy, and now against here Steve Roy, I can absolutely see that the fighting spirit is strong.
I'll tell you one thing, Grayson Wells is throwing leg kicks, but when he does it, he's looking straight down at where he's throwing the kick, which is, I think, a mistake.
Yeah, you want to look low, go high.
Yeah.
All right. Steve Roy appears to have a little bit of advantage striking on the feet, just as far as the hands go.
And his hands are down around his chest, which is actually leaving him wide open for shots by Grayson. I don't know if he's doing that on purpose, but man, it just seems to me like he's not giving Grayson any respect for the stand-up game.
No, he seems to be trying to invoke a little bit of Wonder Boy Thompson, a little bit of Anderson Silva type style, and that's not the easiest thing to just conjure up.
If you've watched the tape on what happened up against LaFantasy, you don't want to take a shot from Grayson Wells, just a lucky shot that he might get in.
No, not at all. I mean, look at Grayson, he's moving. I mean, he's staying on the outside of that jab. He's got fundamental awareness here. And I gotta think that the longer this bout goes on, I mean, that much closer he's going to be to landing that decisive shot.
Gotta say too that the fighters coming out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canadian Fighting Center, which is a great place to train, sea level or at sea level. And the farther this goes for these big guys, the harder it's going to be for Roy to get a breath there.
And Roy goes high with a Superman punch, and Grayson Wells steps underneath, changes levels, and executes a beautiful takedown, ending up in half guard. Now Steve Roy is absolutely showing where he's weak here by simply just holding Grayson Wells to him. I mean, he's basically doing Grayson's job for him right now. As I've said so many times tonight, with his hips exposed to the right side of the cage, he's got a lot of opportunity there to gain that underhook and start to crawl to his feet.
Grayson would be well served to inch him towards that cage and use the cage to his advantage.
Absolutely, with such a long body though, I mean, I really can't even relate to the kind of physical advantage that he's using here. I mean, he's got 3 feet of torso, I mean, probably just about 3.5 feet of arms. I mean, he's basically elbowing them from a position that not a lot of guys can get off substantial damage. I mean, everything that's going on here goes against like what we know biomechanically to be correct about fighting. I mean, his head needs to be over his hips for him to land, for him to create damage, to create space, but he's doing fantastic work here on Steve Roy.
Steve Roy seems to be satisfied to either rest in this position and or just hold him, and for the obvious reason that he doesn't seem to be taking as much punishment in that position. Obviously, if he releases him, he's either going to take punishment or he's going to have to move immediately into a different position to thwart the offense of Grayson.
Absolutely, honestly, it's really tough for me to see guys in this position and not coming up with the answers. A simple shift of the hips, and not committing to a simple shift of the hips and not displaying that you have that in your arsenal it's a big eye opener for not just for people on the analysis side of the sport, but for future opponents. I mean, that's such a vital component to bring a complete MMA game together. I mean, he doesn't have to go out and get a black belt, stop fighting for the next 10 years to bring himself up to the right level of grappling, but he definitely does need to bring up his education.
Chris, I love the way you say that, and the fact that it's not just this fight that he's got to worry about. He's got to worry about this because if he does this, future fighters are going to watch him, and now that's just going to make a whole bunch more holes in his game plan that he's going to have to learn how to defend, because now people are going to be able to watch and take advantage of things like this.
Absolutely. I mean, and that kind of thing, if left unaddressed, it becomes contagious. I mean, it's going to affect his ability to strike, his ability to wrestle, his commitment to his shots.
Now Grayson's got full mount.
He's got full mount, and again, Steve Roy doing Grayson Wells' job well for him, and completely bear hugging him down on the ground. What he needs to do is free his hips, but this fight is just about over. Steve Roy takes a little bit of a pummeling. The hands of Grayson